Lords, 1932. Grey men sit in a room and watch footage of Don Bradman bat. They are desperate. He is the greatest run scorer ever, and they need to find a way to stop him. Their next Ashes depends on them finding a single clue. And when Bradman faces a short ball, England captain Douglas Jardine shouts, "I've got it! He's yellow!" And they all pop their champagne corks and rub each other's bellies as Jardine plans to bowl short, fast balls at Don Bradman. So if you need a VPN, go Nord. Use nordvpn.com/Kimber to get a huge discount off your Nord VPN plan plus 4 additional months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the show notes. Protect your computer like a cricketer protects its nether region with NordVPN today. Most of that story is true. I don't know about the rubbing bellies. But the point is that that was not cricket's first matchup. And yet that term is one of the most hated in our sport at the moment. Apparently they take away from many people's favourite part of cricket, having a magical soothsayer, captain guru who conjures up wickets from the farts of angels. So when they see an off-spinner take a right-hander, they shout, see, we told you. Matchups don't make sense. So is it possible that matchups are nonsense and that we should all just trust in the guts of our captains? At the Oval in 2021, Virat Kohli said that R. Ashwin had been left out of a test because they wanted Ravi Jadeja to bowl to all of England's left-handers. This was a matchup-based comment, and yet it goes against the normal, where you bowl off-spin to left-handers. That's because matchups are complicated, partly because cricket is. In the World Cup semi-final, we saw Travis Head take 2 wickets with his off-spin against right-handers, and then he himself was dismissed by Keshav Maharaj, a left-arm finger spinner. And again, against the normal matchups. And the best way of explaining matchups is that they are not certainty, but just weighting things slightly in your favours. But that World Cup semi-final is actually really worth looking at. Travis Head is a proper part-time option. So he prefers bowling to left-handers, which makes sense because he's an off-spinner. But he also bowled just 41 overs between the 2019 World Cup and the semi-final against South Africa. He dismissed 2 righties and 2 lefties, and he bowled about the same amount of overs to both of them, but was far less expensive against the cack-handers than he was against the traditional players who were standing on the right side of the bat. One of those right-handers was actually Heinrich Klaasen. Now, clearly the big South African had been in terrific form in the World Cup cycle, and as well as the World Cup itself. Here are his numbers by bowling type since the 2019 World Cup. So he doesn't really have any weaknesses that you can go up against him with a matchup. And as far as off-spin is concerned, he attacks it a lot more, but also gets out to it quite often. Klaasen got out to Head in the series before the World Cup trying to sweep. This time he was well set on 39 when Head came on to bowl for the 31st over. Klaasen hit him for a couple of 4s and then got out playing inside the line to a livery that came in and hit middle and leg stump. So the point there is that matchups aren't just about a very basic thing at one level. There's lots of different parts of matchups, even within the very obvious you should bowl off spin to left-handers more. Not to mention that captains sometimes have to improvise based on their gut feeling. There's boundary sizes, pitch conditions, game situations, and the form of other bowlers, and just the normal shit happens. It would be very hard to program all that into something that would actually help you pick the right matchup every time. For instance, Cummins may have remembered that Head had got Klaasen out before, or he might have factored in that Klaasen attacks a lot more against off-spin. That was an awkward bit of the game. Maybe they just wanted him to take a risk. Also remember that was the last recognised batting pair for South Africa. Even though Janssen had been pretty handy with the bat in the World Cup, he was now batting in a much different scenario. And he had not faced a single ball of off-spin in that World because generally he would come in at the death. So obviously they weren't going to make a change because it was in the same over. But even so, again, off-spin wasn't the worst thing to offer up to Marco Jansen. And sadly for him, it worked. He got stuck on the crease, missed a ball, which would go on to crash into leg stump even after he took a review. But that is all anecdotal. What about the main question? How do off-break and left-arm finger spinners perform by batting hand? We looked at the numbers for all the World Cup teams. We also threw in West Indies and Zimbabwe so that the results weren't too skewed by the poorer teams. And these trends make a lot of sense. Right-handers usually prefer off-spin, while left-handers prefer left-arm orthodox. On average, batters of both types score more runs and quicker when the ball is coming into them rather than spinning away. This isn't something we just learnt with matchup data, of course. Cricketers have kind of always known this. But in that World Cup semi-final, Keshav Maharaj dismissed Travis Head, which again goes against the obvious trend. But there is more to the matchup than that. Obviously, Maharaj is one of the best left-arm finger spinners around, which was evident during this World Cup. So while he is obviously a lot better against right-handers, he wouldn't be playing at this level and doing as well as he could if he couldn't bowl against left-handers as well. And he's certainly a lot better than most left-arm finger spinners when going up against the southpaws. He has actually been more economical against left-hand batters in this 4-year period than right-hand batters. Of course, in contrast to that, Travis Head absolutely murders left-arm finger spin, but he didn't get to face Maharaj in the series before the World Cup. And so early on in that semi-final, he faces a brilliant ball and is dismissed off the very first delivery he faced from Maharaj. Again, there was nothing that could have predicted this, and that's because matchups don't actually predict the future. All they do is give you a little bit more information. A lot of people complain that I'm not a former cricketer, and so that I don't really know the game. Well, you know what they can't claim? Then I don't know desks. I've been using desks for years. I'm a collector of desks, old and new, and I'm sitting on a new one right now. I'm the Don Bradman of sitting at desks. So when I tell you that the E7 Pro next generation height adjustable desk from FlexiSpot is legit, this is like Michael Jordan talking to you about sneakers. This desk holds 160 kilograms. It is as stable as anything I've ever seen, and it has under-desk cable management. But really, the main skill here is that this desk rises and falls at the push of a button, and it moves super quick. And it has so many settings that remember your favorite heights. It really does it all. And I could not recommend the E7 Pro from FlexiSpot anymore, even though I am currently sitting on one of FlexiSpot's BS12 Pro multifunctional, adjustable, upgraded fabric, ergonomic chairs. My butt and computer have never been happier than when using one of FlexiSpot's products. So get over to their page right now for big savings. They also depend on things on when a bowler is best suited to be used. So Maharaj obviously usually bowls predominantly in the middle overs phase. And that was one of the big questions that people had. Why didn't Maharaj come on earlier? Well, he usually likes to be used after that first power play with a slightly older ball where he averages less than 20 and goes at 3.72 runs per over. So he knows when he wants to bowl. And he also knows that he can bowl against left-handers. In fact, he is among the best spinners in the world against them. He is by far the most economical, and he also has a decent average. And shout out to Akil Hassan for also being the standout here. You can see that Santner doesn't concede many runs, but he can't get the left-handers out. Shakib is good and Jadeja is alright, but they both clearly prefer right-handers with the white ball. And when we're looking at the off-spinners, we know that Shayan didn't have a great World Cup, but he's probably amongst the best off-spinners along with Mujib against the right-handers. However, the reason they are so good against the right-handers is both of them can actually take the ball away. So you wouldn't classify them as conventional off-spin. You can see that Dhananjaya De Silva didn't take many wickets in the World Cup, but he has a respectable record against right-handers as well. But Mohammad Nabi is by far the most economical. Maxwell holds his own against righties for someone who is more of a part-timer, but he also prefers southpaws when it comes to being a defensive option. And what about right-handers against these left-arm finger spinners? Well, Shreyas Iyer and Josh Butler are the clear standouts here. Iyer is just one of the best players of spin in the world, and he doesn't get out to left-arm finger spinners, but he also doesn't score as fast against them as he does other types. Sikandar Raza, mind you, never got out to them in this 4-year period, and he also scores at a good clip against these types of bowlers. Baba Azam and Sidira Samarawikrama are also pretty good at just milking them around without getting out, though Baba scores slightly slower than Iyer and Samarawikrama. Rohit Sharma, Steve Smith, Daryl Mitchell and Mohammad Rizwan have a terrific record. They don't get dismissed that often, and they do have the ability to put pressure back on those left-arm finger spinners. During the World Cup, we actually talked about Kohli's struggle against this form of bowling, and Manas also showed us in the World Cup that he doesn't like it. And you can see there's also another group here. Hope, Shanaka and Mendes are also in this cluster who can't really attack left-arm finger spin and also get out to it quite a lot. But you can see here the majority of right-hand batters do not prefer facing left-arm orthodox spin, and it makes sense because the average batter prefers the ball coming back into them rather than going away. And that is probably the most talked about matchup in modern day cricket, regardless of the format. R. Ashwin dismissing Chris Gale in the 2011 IPL final is a classic example. Chris Gale going out to Joe Root in the 2016 World Cup final. But Ratchan Ravindra, Ishan Kishan, Devon Conway and Kusal Pereira are the obvious outliers here, though Conway is not as quick a scorer against the offies. So you can see overall why teams would favour matchups. But you can also see how some players don't actually conform to that. And I think one reason matchups have got such a bad reputation is because of how skeptical commentators have been in describing them, or because for some people it means that takes away from the magic of gut calls. But even intuition-based decisions need information. Do you know who was a brilliant user of matchups? MS Dhoni. Did he spend hours with an analyst? People tell me he didn't, but he was still using matchups. So why does it make a difference whether he had just worked it out naturally or he went and did his homework? The idea is to get your team into a better position, which is what Dhoni did. Yet for many, matchups are seen as anti-cricket. Like a monster has started taking over and only old cricketers can save us. But what could be more cricket than looking at how one form of bowling does better than another against certain batters? People for generations have used these ideas. The difference now is we can actually check this stuff. Matchups aren't new. As I talked about with England and Bradman, we've also seen Warne being brought on for Cullinan, and for hundreds of years, off-spinners have bowled against left-handers. The real issue is that matchups are often talked about or seen as one-dimensional, sometimes by teams, but often by fans and media. You can't just throw the ball to a left-arm finger spinner and hope to make things difficult for Shreyas Iyer, because he's really good against that type of bowling. Just because he's right-handed doesn't mean it's automatic. And you also can't just hold back someone the quality of Maharaj just because Travis Head is well set. So matchups are complicated, but they are often explained in a black or white way. All a matchup is really doing is taking a 50-50 situation and making it, hopefully, 54-46 in your favour. That certainly doesn't mean that it's going to work every time, just 5.6 times out of 10. Cricketers are not robots, and our pitch is made of living grass. The match situation, form of the batter, bowler, head-to-head record, the wind are all going to have relevance and must be factored in while making any plans for specific batters. But of course, so should matchups. Not just one generic number, but all the information we can get. Remember when I talked about Virat Kohli choosing a left-arm orthodox in a test ahead of an off-spinner to take on England's mini southpaw? You might be thinking, why did he do that? Well, in that game, there was an awful lot of right arm seam from both teams that was going to be bowled, and the oval breaks up as a surface. So Kohli thought Jadeja could use the rough and attack the stumps of the left-handers. It's still a matchup. He just flipped it based on new information he had. And of course matchups are not always going to work because nothing is always going to work. But the important thing is that cricket has always had them. And the only thing new is how much information we actually have to back them up. Instead of smoke-filled rooms, we have laptops and iPads now.